The sun was setting behind the mountains when Jake Sullivan rode into the small trading post near the Arizona border. His horse was tired, and dust covered his clothes from head to toe. He had been riding for 3 days straight, trying to reach California before winter set in. The year was 1878, and the Apache Wars were making travel dangerous for any white man in this territory. Jake was a simple cowboy from Texas. He had worked on ranches all his life, moving cattle and fixing fences. He was tall with brown hair and kind eyes, but he could handle a gun when needed. His father had died in the Civil War, and his mother had passed from fever 2 years ago. Now he was alone in the world, looking for a new start in California where his uncle had a ranch. The trading post was run by an old man named Henry Garrett. Henry had lived in Apache territory for 20 years and had learned to respect the native people. He sold supplies to travelers and sometimes traded with peaceful Apache bands. When Jake knocked on his door that evening, Henry could see the young man was exhausted. "Come in, son," Henry said. "You look like you've been riding through hell." Jake tied his horse to the post and walked inside. The cabin was small but comfortable. There was a fireplace, some shelves with supplies, and a table where Henry ate his meals. Jake sat down heavily in a chair. "I'm heading to California," Jake told him. "Been riding for days, haven't seen another soul on the trail." Henry poured him some coffee and sat across from him. "You're lucky to be alive, young man. The Apache have been raiding heavy this past month. Chief Running Bear and his warriors have been attacking anyone who crosses their land." Jake had heard stories about Running Bear. The chief was known as a fierce warrior who had been fighting the white settlers for years. The government had tried to force his people onto a reservation, but Running Bear refused to go. He said his ancestors were buried in these mountains, and he would rather die than leave their graves. "Why don't you stay here for a few days?" Henry suggested. "Let things calm down before you continue west." Jake agreed. He was tired of sleeping on the ground, and his horse needed rest too. Henry had a small room in the back where travelers could sleep. That night, Jake lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Henry showed Jake around the trading post. There was a small barn for horses, a well for fresh water, and gardens where Henry grew vegetables. Jake offered to help with chores to pay for his room and board. He was good with animals and fixed a broken fence that had been bothering Henry for months. On the second day, something unexpected happened. Jake was working near the well when he heard horses approaching. He looked up and saw a group of Apache riders coming toward the trading post. His heart started beating fast, and he reached for his gun. "Easy, son," Henry called out. "These are friendly. Chief Running Bear sometimes sends people to trade for supplies." Jake watched as 5 Apache warriors rode up to the cabin. They were dressed in traditional clothes with feathers in their hair and paint on their faces. Their horses were beautiful spotted ponies that seemed to dance as they moved. But it wasn't the warriors that caught Jake's attention. Riding behind them was a young Apache woman. She was the most beautiful person Jake had ever seen. She had long black hair that shined in the sunlight and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a deerskin dress decorated with beads and shells. She sat on her horse like she was born to ride. The woman's name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom in her language. She was Chief Running Bear's daughter, and she was known among her people for her wisdom and courage. She often came with trading parties because she could speak some English and help with negotiations. Jake stared at her without meaning to. He had never felt anything like what he was feeling now. It was like lightning had struck him. Ayana seemed to notice him looking at her, and for just a moment, their eyes met. Jake felt his face turn red, and he looked away quickly. Henry went out to greet the Apache traders. They had brought beautiful blankets, pottery, and silver jewelry to trade for coffee, sugar, and metal tools. Henry always treated them fairly, which is why they trusted him. While Henry and the warriors talked business, Jake pretended to work on the fence. But he kept glancing at Ayanna. She had gotten off her horse and was looking at the goods Henry had for trade. Sometimes she would look in his direction, too. Jake noticed that Ayanna seemed different from what he expected. The stories he had heard about Apache women said they were just servants to the men. But Ayanna clearly had authority. The warriors listened when she spoke, and she helped make decisions about the trading. After an hour, the trading was finished. The Apache loaded their new supplies onto pack horses. As they prepared to leave, Ayanna walked past Jake. She was so close he could smell the sweet sage in her hair. She stopped and looked directly at him. In careful English, she said, "You are new here, Cowboy." Jake was so surprised he almost dropped his hammer. "Yes, ma'am. I'm just passing through." She studied his face for a long moment. "Be careful on these mountains. Many dangers for white men who travel alone." Before Jake could answer, she walked back to her horse and mounted gracefully. The Apache party rode away toward the mountains, but Jake kept watching until they disappeared from sight. That night at dinner, Henry noticed Jake was quiet and thoughtful. "That was Ayanna," Henry said. "Chief Running Bear's daughter, smart as a whip and brave as any warrior. Her mother was a medicine woman who died when Ayanna was young. The chief raised her to be strong and independent." "She spoke English very well," Jake said, trying to sound casual. Henry smiled. "She learned from missionaries when she was a girl, before the fighting got bad. She's probably the only Apache woman in these parts who can read and write. Her father is very proud of her." Jake went to bed that night thinking about Ayanna. He had never met anyone like her. Most women he knew back in Texas were quiet and stayed in the background. But Ayanna was different. She was confident and unafraid. She looked at the world with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. The next few days passed quietly. Jake helped Henry with work around the trading post and tried not to think about the Apache woman. But every time he heard horses approaching, his heart would jump, hoping it might be another trading party with Ayanna. On the fourth day, Jake was chopping wood behind the cabin when Henry came running out of the house. His face was pale, and he was carrying his rifle. "Get inside, quick!" Henry shouted. "Apache war party coming this way!" Jake dropped his axe and ran for the cabin. Through the window, he could see dust clouds in the distance. As they got closer, he could make out dozens of Apache warriors on horseback. They were painted for war and carrying weapons. "That's Chief Running Bear himself," Henry whispered, looking through his spyglass. "And he's got at least 200 warriors with him." Jake felt his blood turn cold. This wasn't a trading party. This was a war party, and they were heading straight for the cabin. "Why are they coming here?" Jake asked. "I thought you were friendly with them." Henry shook his head grimly. "Something must have happened. Maybe soldiers attacked one of their camps. When Apache are on the warpath, they don't stop to ask if you're friend or enemy." The sound of war cries filled the air as the Apache warriors surrounded the small cabin. Jake could see them through the windows, their faces painted with red and black stripes. Their horses snorted and stamped impatiently as the warriors formed a complete circle around the trading post. Chief Running Bear rode forward on a magnificent white horse. He was a tall man with gray in his hair and scars on his chest from many battles. His eyes were hard as stone as he looked at the cabin. "Henry Garrett!" the chief called out in English. "Come out, we need to talk." Henry looked at Jake. "Stay inside and keep your gun ready. Don't shoot unless I give the signal." Henry walked out of the cabin with his hands visible but not raised. He wasn't surrendering, but he was showing he didn't want to fight. "Chief Running Bear," Henry said respectfully, "what brings you to my post with so many warriors?" The chief's face was like carved stone. 3 days ago, white soldiers attacked our village while the men were hunting. They killed women and children, old people and babies. My youngest son is dead." Jake felt sick to his stomach. He had heard about these kinds of attacks. Some army officers thought the only good Apache was a dead Apache. They would attack peaceful villages just to spread fear. "I am sorry for your loss, Chief," Henry said sincerely. "But I had nothing to do with it." "I know you are not like other white men," Running Bear replied, "but you have a stranger with you, a cowboy who might be a spy for the soldiers." Through the window, Jake could see the chief pointing toward the cabin. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. 200 Apache warriors wanted him dead, and there was nowhere to run. "He is just a traveler," Henry said. "Heading west to California. He's not a soldier." Chief Running Bear was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, and his voice was like thunder before a storm. "Bring him out. We will see what kind of man he is." Henry turned toward the cabin. Jake knew he had no choice. If he stayed inside, they would burn the cabin down. If he ran, they would chase him and kill him for sure. His only chance was to face them with dignity and hope they would show mercy. Jake walked to the door and took a deep breath. As he stepped outside into the fading sunlight, he found himself looking at 200 Apache warriors who wanted his blood. Their eyes were filled with hatred for all white men. But then something unexpected happened. As Jake walked out of the cabin, he saw a familiar figure among the Apache warriors. It was Ayanna, sitting on her painted pony near her father. She was wearing war paint like the men, and she carried a bow and arrows like any warrior. When Ayanna saw Jake, her eyes widened with surprise. For just a moment, their gazes met across the circle of angry warriors. In that instant, Jake saw something in her eyes that gave him hope. It wasn't hatred like the others. It was something else entirely. Chief Running Bear followed his daughter's gaze and saw her looking at the cowboy. The chief's expression grew even more serious. He had noticed something that could change everything about this confrontation. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and the shadows were growing long. The Apache warriors waited silently for their chief's decision. Would they kill the white stranger, or would something unexpected happen that could change the course of this dangerous encounter? Jake stood straight and tall, trying not to show his fear. He was surrounded by enemies who had every reason to hate him, but the memory of Ayanna's eyes gave him courage. Whatever happened next would determine whether he lived to see another sunrise. Chief Running Bear studied Jake with eyes that seemed to see into his soul. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The Apache warriors sat motionless on their horses, waiting for their leader's command. Jake could hear his own heartbeat and the snorting of horses in the cooling evening air. "What is your name, white man?" the chief finally asked. "Jake Sullivan, sir," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady despite his fear. "Sullivan," the chief repeated. "Irish name. Are you a soldier?" "No, sir. I'm a cowboy from Texas. I work with cattle." Chief Running Bear rode his horse closer to Jake. The animal was magnificent, pure white except for black markings around its eyes that looked like war paint. The chief wore traditional Apache clothing with silver ornaments that caught the last rays of sunlight. "My daughter tells me you were respectful when she spoke to you," the chief said. "This is unusual for white men in our territory." Jake glanced toward Ayanna, who was watching the conversation intently. "She deserved respect, Chief." Anyone could see she was a lady. Several Apache warriors laughed harshly at this. To them, the idea of a white man calling an Apache woman a lady was strange. But Chief Running Bear held up his hand for silence. "You call her a lady, but your people call us savages," the chief said. "Your soldiers kill our children and steal our land. Why should I not kill you right here?" Jake thought carefully before answering. He knew his life depended on his next words. "Chief Running Bear, I can't speak for all white men. Some have done terrible things, and I'm sorry for that. But I've never hurt an Apache person, and I never would." I was raised to believe that all people deserve to be treated with respect, no matter what they look like or where they come from. The chief studied Jake's face, looking for signs of deception. Apache people were known for their ability to read a person's true character. "Pretty words," the chief said, "but words are like wind. They blow away quickly. Actions are what matter." Chief Running Bear turned to his warriors and spoke rapidly in Apache. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he could tell there was disagreement among the men. Some seemed to want immediate action, while others appeared to be listening to different voices in the discussion. Henry stepped forward. "Chief, this young man has been nothing but respectful since he arrived at my post. He's helped with work and hasn't caused any trouble." "You vouch for him, Henry Garrett?" "I do, Chief." Chief Running Bear was quiet again, thinking. The shadows were getting longer, and Jake realized that darkness would come soon. He wondered if that would be better or worse for his chances of survival. Suddenly, Ayanna spoke up in Apache. Her voice was clear and confident as she addressed her father. The conversation went back and forth between them for several minutes. Jake noticed that the other warriors listened respectfully when she spoke, even though she was a woman. This showed how much they valued her opinion. Finally, Chief Running Bear turned back to Jake. "My daughter says you have honest eyes. She believes you are different from the soldiers who killed our people. But I must be sure before I let you live." "What do you want me to do?" Jake asked. "There will be a test," the chief announced. "If you pass, you may continue your journey west. If you fail, you will join your ancestors tonight." Jake felt his mouth go dry, but he nodded. "I understand." Chief Running Bear pointed toward the mountains. "In those hills, there is a sacred place where my people have prayed for many generations. 3 days ago, soldiers came and destroyed our medicine lodge and scattered the bones of our ancestors. This is why we are on the warpath." Jake felt sick hearing about such disrespect for Apache sacred places. Even though he wasn't religious himself, he understood that some things were holy to people and should never be disturbed. "The test is this," the chief continued. "You will go to that sacred place. You will gather the bones of our ancestors that were scattered by the soldiers. You will rebuild the medicine lodge with your own hands. And you will do this alone, with no weapons except a knife for cutting wood." The Apache warriors murmured among themselves. This was a dangerous test. The sacred place was far from the trading post, and there were mountain lions, bears, and other dangers in those hills. Plus, if soldiers were still in the area, Jake would be defenseless. "How long do I have?" Jake asked. 3 days, the chief replied. "If you are not back by sunset on the 3rd day, we will know you have failed or run away. Then we will burn this trading post and everyone in it." Henry's face went pale. The chief was not just testing Jake, but putting Henry's life at risk too. "And if I succeed?" Jake asked. Chief Running Bear looked at his daughter, then back at Jake. "If you succeed, it will prove you understand honor. You will be free to go, and my people will remember you as a friend." Jake thought about the test. It seemed almost impossible. He would have to travel into dangerous territory, perform sacred work for people whose customs he didn't understand, and make it back alive, all within 3 days. But looking around at the circle of Apache warriors, he realized he had no choice. It was either try the test or die right here. "I accept," Jake said. Chief Running Bear nodded with what might have been approval. "Good. But first, my daughter will explain to you the proper way to handle sacred things. Even if you are white, you must show respect for Apache ways." Ayanna dismounted from her horse and walked toward Jake. As she approached, he could see she was even more beautiful than he had remembered. But now there was something else in her expression, too. She looked worried, maybe even scared for him. "The sacred place is very dangerous," she said quietly in English. not just because of wild animals. The spirits of our ancestors guard that place. If you go there with bad intentions or disrespect, they will know. I don't have bad intentions, Jake said. I just want to do what's right. She studied his face carefully. I believe you, but believing is not enough. You must feel it in your heart. Our ancestors can see into a person's soul. Ayanna spent the next hour teaching Jake about Apache customs for handling sacred objects. She explained how to purify himself before touching the bones, which prayers to say, and how to arrange things properly when rebuilding the medicine lodge. Jake listened carefully to every word. He was surprised by how complex and thoughtful Apache spiritual practices were. The soldiers who had destroyed the sacred place obviously didn't understand or care what they were destroying. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Chief Running Bear gave Jake final instructions. You will leave at dawn. Travel north toward the Twin Peaks. The sacred place is in a canyon between them. You will know it when you see the old oak tree that grows beside a spring. That is where our people have prayed for many generations. How will I know if I'm doing things correctly? Jake asked. The chief looked at his daughter. Ayanna will watch from a distance. If you are respectful and sincere, she will not interfere. But if you dishonor our sacred place, she will stop you. Jake felt both relieved and nervous to know that Ayanna would be nearby. Relieved because it meant he wouldn't be completely alone, but nervous because she would be watching his every move. That night, Jake barely slept. He lay in his bed at the trading post, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the task ahead. Henry sat beside him for a while, offering what comfort he could. I'm sorry I got you into this mess, Henry said. It's not your fault, Jake replied. The soldiers who attacked that Apache village are the ones who caused this. I'm just caught in the middle. That girl, Ayanna, Henry said thoughtfully. She's taking a big risk speaking up for you. Apache women don't usually get involved in war decisions. Why do you think she did it? Henry smiled sadly. Son, I may be old, but I'm not blind. I saw the way you two looked at each other when she was here trading. And I saw the way she looked at you tonight when her father announced the test. Jake felt his face turn red. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't, Henry chuckled. But let me give you some advice. Apache people value courage above almost everything else. If you can complete this test, you'll earn their respect. But more than that, you might earn the right to court the chief's daughter properly. Court her? Jake was shocked. Henry, she's an Apache princess, and I'm just a cowboy with nothing to my name. Maybe so, Henry said. But stranger things have happened on this frontier. The important thing right now is to focus on the test. Get some sleep if you can. But sleep didn't come easily. Jake kept thinking about Ayanna's dark eyes and the way she had looked worried about his safety. Did she really care what happened to him? Or was she just being kind to a stranger who was in trouble? At dawn, Jake prepared for his journey. He packed some food and water, though not too much since he would have to carry everything himself. Chief Running Bear had given him a special knife for cutting wood and some rope for building. The Apache warriors were waiting outside the trading post. They watched silently as Jake checked his supplies one last time. Their faces showed no emotion, but Jake could feel their eyes following his every movement. Chief Running Bear rode up on his white horse. Are you ready, Sullivan? As ready as I can be, Chief. Remember, you must return by sunset on the third day. If you are even 1 minute late, you will have failed. Jake nodded and started walking north toward the Twin Peaks in the distance. Behind him, he could hear the Apache warriors mounting their horses. Some would return to their village, but others would stay hidden in the area to watch and make sure he didn't try to escape. After walking for about an hour, Jake heard hoofbeats behind him. He turned and saw Ayanna riding toward him on her spotted pony. She was alone and no longer wore war paint. I wanted to wish you good luck before you get too far, she said, stopping her horse beside him. Thank you. That means a lot to me. She reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of turquoise carved in the shape of a bird. This belonged to my mother, Ayanna said. It will help protect you in the sacred place. Jake took the carved bird and felt how smooth it was from years of handling. I can't accept this. It's too valuable. You must take it, she insisted. My mother was a medicine woman. Her spirit will guide you if you carry this with respect. Jake carefully put the turquoise bird in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. I promise I'll take good care of it. Ayanna looked into his eyes with an expression he couldn't quite read. Jake Sullivan, why are you doing this? You could try to escape during the night. My father's warriors might not catch you if you had a good head start. I gave my word, Jake said simply. And besides, what those soldiers did to your sacred place was wrong. If I can help fix it, then that's what I should do. She was quiet for a long moment. Most white men would not feel this way. Maybe I'm not like most white men. No, she said softly. I do not think you are. Ayanna turned her horse and rode back toward where her father's warriors were camped. Jake watched her go, then continued walking north toward the Twin Peaks. He had 2.5 days to complete an almost impossible task, and somehow he was determined to succeed. Jake reached the Twin Peaks by midday. The mountains rose like giant stone guardians against the blue sky, and between them he could see a narrow canyon cutting deep into the earth. The path down was steep and rocky, and Jake had to be careful not to fall as he made his way toward the bottom. As he descended into the canyon, Jake felt a strange sensation, like he was entering a place that was different from the ordinary world. The air seemed thicker, and there was an unusual quiet that made even his footsteps sound too loud. Birds that had been singing in the trees above fell silent as he passed. Near the bottom of the canyon, Jake found the old oak tree that Chief Running Bear had described. It was massive, probably hundreds of years old, with branches that spread out like protective arms. Beside it, a natural spring bubbled up from the rocks, creating a small pool of clear water. But the sacred place itself was a scene of terrible destruction. What had once been a carefully built medicine lodge was now just scattered logs and broken stones. Sacred objects were thrown around carelessly, and Jake could see bones that had been dug up and scattered by the soldiers. Jake felt angry looking at the damage. Even though he wasn't Apache, he could understand that this place meant something important to the people. Destroying it was like burning down a church or desecrating a cemetery. He sat down beside the spring to rest and plan his work. The turquoise bird that Ayanna had given him felt warm against his chest, almost like it had a heartbeat of its own. Jake pulled it out and looked at it carefully. The carving was incredibly detailed, showing every feather on the bird's wings. Well, little bird, Jake said quietly, your owner's daughter is counting on me. I better not let her down. Jake began by gathering all the scattered bones very carefully. Ayanna had taught him that each bone had to be handled with respect and purified with water from the sacred spring. It was slow work, and Jake found himself saying small prayers for each person whose remains had been disturbed. Some of the bones were old and fragile, clearly from people who had died long ago. Others seemed more recent. Jake realized he was handling the remains of grandparents, children, warriors, and medicine people who had been laid to rest in this sacred place by their families. As the sun began to set on the first day, Jake had gathered all the bones he could find. He arranged them carefully under the old oak tree, covered with a blanket he had brought, just as Ayanna had instructed him. That night, Jake slept beside the sacred spring. He had strange dreams filled with Apache voices speaking in their own language. Although he couldn't understand the words, the voices didn't sound angry. They seemed to be watching him, testing him, trying to decide if he was worthy of trust. The second day, Jake began rebuilding the medicine lodge. The soldiers had knocked down the walls and broken many of the support beams, but some of the wood could still be used. Jake cut new logs from trees in the canyon, being careful to take only what he needed and to thank each tree before cutting it down, as Ayanna had taught him. Building the lodge was harder than Jake had expected. The Apache had used special techniques for fitting the logs together, and Jake had to figure out how they worked by looking at the pieces that were still intact. His hands were soon cut and bleeding from handling rough wood, but he kept working. Around midday, Jake felt like he was being watched. He looked around but couldn't see anyone. Then he noticed movement on the canyon rim high above. It was Ayanna, sitting on her horse in the shade of some trees. She was too far away for him to see her face clearly, but he knew she was observing his work. Jake waved to her, and after a moment, she raised her hand in return. Then she disappeared back into the trees. Knowing she was nearby gave Jake comfort and motivation to continue his work. By evening of the second day, Jake had rebuilt most of the medicine lodge. The walls were up, and he had started working on the roof. His whole body ached, and his hands were raw from handling wood and rope, but he was making good progress. As darkness fell, Jake heard something that made his blood freeze. It was the sound of wolves howling in the distance. Then, closer to the canyon, he heard the scream of a mountain lion. Jake realized that he was not alone in this wilderness, and that some of the creatures here might see him as prey. Jake built up his small fire and tried to stay alert through the night. Several times he heard movement in the darkness around the canyon, but nothing came close to the sacred place. It was as if the spirits Ayanna had mentioned were protecting the area from dangerous animals. On the morning of the third day, Jake woke up knowing this was his last chance. He had to finish the medicine lodge and arrange the sacred bones properly, then make the long journey back to the trading post before sunset. If he was even a few minutes late, Chief Running Bear would consider the test failed. Jake worked faster than he ever had before. He finished the roof of the medicine lodge and carefully placed the sacred objects inside, arranging everything just as Ayanna had described. The bones of the ancestors were laid to rest again with proper ceremony, and Jake said prayers over each one, asking for forgiveness for the disturbance they had suffered. When everything was complete, Jake stood back and looked at his work. The medicine lodge wasn't as perfect as the original had been, but it was solid and built with respect. More importantly, it felt right. The strange heaviness in the air had lifted, and Jake could hear birds singing again for the first time since he had entered the canyon. Jake gathered his few belongings and started the difficult climb out of the canyon. The sun was already high in the sky, and he knew he would have to push himself hard to make it back to the trading post by sunset. The journey back seemed much longer than the trip to the sacred place had been. Jake's legs were tired from 3 days of hard work, and the pack on his back felt heavier with each mile. But every time he thought about stopping to rest, he remembered Ayanna's worried face and Henry's life depending on his success. As the afternoon wore on, Jake began to worry that he wouldn't make it in time. The sun seemed to be moving faster across the sky than usual, and the trading post was still miles away. Jake pushed himself to walk faster, even though his lungs were burning and his legs felt like they might give out. Just as Jake was beginning to think he might fail, he heard the sound of hoofbeats behind him. He turned and saw Ayanna riding toward him on her spotted pony, but this time she was leading a second horse. "Get on," she said simply, stopping beside him. "Is this allowed?" Jake asked. "Your father said I had to do this alone." "You did do it alone," Ayanna replied. "You completed the sacred work by yourself. Now you just need to get back before sunset, and my father said nothing about how you had to travel back." Jake didn't argue. He climbed onto the spare horse and they rode together toward the trading post. As they traveled, Ayanna asked him about what he had experienced in the sacred place. "Did you feel the spirits of our ancestors?" she asked. "I felt something," Jake admitted. "Like I wasn't alone even when I couldn't see anyone. And the animals stayed away like something was protecting the place." Ayanna nodded. "The spirits were watching you. They could see your heart was sincere. That is why they accepted your work." "How do you know?" "Because if they had not accepted you, you would not have been able to complete the lodge. The spirits would have made it impossible." As they rode, Jake found himself looking at Ayanna and wondering about the future. Even if he passed Chief Running Bear's test, he was still planning to continue west to California. But the idea of leaving Ayanna behind was becoming harder to bear. "What will you do when this is over?" Ayanna asked, as if she could read his thoughts. "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "I was planning to go to California, but now what?" Jake looked into her dark eyes. "Now I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." They rode in silence for a while, both thinking about what Jake's words might mean. As the sun was getting low in the sky, they could see the trading post in the distance. Around it, Jake could see the Apache warriors waiting. Chief Running Bear sat on his white horse, watching the horizon for Jake's return. "Will your father be angry that you helped me get back in time?" Jake asked. "My father is a wise man," Ayanna replied. "He will understand that I did what was right." They reached the trading post just as the bottom edge of the sun touched the mountains. Chief Running Bear rode out to meet them, followed by his warriors. Henry came out of the cabin, looking relieved to see Jake alive and on time. "You have returned, Sullivan," the chief said. "Tell me about the sacred place." Jake dismounted and walked toward Chief Running Bear. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the turquoise bird, then handed it back to Ayanna. "The medicine lodge has been rebuilt," Jake said. "The bones of your ancestors have been returned to their proper resting place with respect and ceremony. The spirits of that place are at peace again." Chief Running Bear studied Jake's face for signs of deception. "You were not tempted to run away when you reached the canyon?" "No, Chief. I gave my word, and your sacred place deserved to be treated with respect." "And you felt no fear of Apache spirits or Apache ways?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. "I felt fear, but not of Apache spirits. I was afraid I might do something wrong or disrespectful. Your ancestors' spirits were not enemies. They were teachers, showing me the right way to honor what is sacred." Several of the Apache warriors murmured with approval. Chief Running Bear nodded slowly. "My daughter tells me the spirits accepted your work. This is confirmed by the fact that you were able to complete the task. You have passed the test, Jake Sullivan." Jake felt relief wash over him like a cool breeze. "You are free to continue your journey west," the chief continued. "And you have earned the friendship of our people. You will always be welcome in Apache territory." "Thank you, Chief Running Bear. That means more to me than you know." The chief looked at his daughter, then back at Jake. "But I think perhaps your plans for traveling west may have changed." Jake glanced at Ayanna, who was watching him with an expression he was beginning to recognize. It was the same look she had given him when they first met, like she could see something in him that he wasn't even sure was there himself. "Chief," Jake said, taking a deep breath, "I would like to ask your permission for something." "Speak." "I would like permission to court your daughter, if she would have me. I know I'm just a cowboy with nothing to offer, but I give you my word that I would treat her with the respect she deserves." The Apache warriors all turned to look at their chief, waiting for his response. This was unheard of. A white man asking to court an Apache chief's daughter. Chief Running Bear was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "You are not just a cowboy, Jake Sullivan. You are a man who keeps his word and shows respect for what is sacred. These are the qualities that matter most." The chief turned to his daughter. "Ayanna, what is your answer to this man's request?" Ayanna looked at Jake, then at her father. When she spoke, her voice was clear and confident. I would be honored to have Jake Sullivan court me if he truly means to stay and learn our ways. I do mean it, Jake said quickly. I want to learn everything about Apache ways and prove myself worthy of your trust. Chief Running Bear smiled for the first time since Jake had met him. Then it is settled. You will live among our people and show by your actions that you are sincere. If after 1 year you still wish to marry my daughter, and she still wishes to marry you, you will have my blessing. The Apache warriors began talking excitedly among themselves. This was an unusual situation, but they respected their chief's judgment. Some of them had been watching Jake during the test and were impressed by his determination and respectful attitude. As the Apache war party prepared to return to their village, Ayanna rode up beside Jake one more time. Are you certain about this decision? She asked. Life among my people will be very different from what you know. Jake reached up and took her hand. I've never been more certain about anything in my life. When I saw you that first day at the trading post, everything changed for me. I just didn't understand it then. She squeezed his hand gently. Then we will see what the future brings for us. Henry stood beside Jake as they watched the Apache riders disappear into the gathering darkness. Well, son, Henry said with a chuckle, I guess you won't be needing that job in California after all. No, sir, Jake replied, still looking in the direction Ayanna had gone. I think I found something better right here. That night, Jake wrote a letter to his uncle in California, explaining that he would not be coming after all. He had found a new life and possibly a new love in Arizona territory. It wasn't the life he had planned, but sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. 3 months later, Jake was living in the Apache village and learning their language and customs. He proved himself as a hunter and protector, and he never forgot the respect that had saved his life during that dangerous test in the sacred canyon. 1 year after that night, when 200 Apache warriors had surrounded the cabin, Jake Sullivan and Ayanna were married in a ceremony that honored both Apache and white traditions. Chief Running Bear gave his blessing, and even some of the warriors who had wanted to kill Jake that first night admitted that he had become a true friend to their people. The story of the cowboy who rebuilt the medicine lodge became a legend among the Apache, and sometimes, when travelers passed through their territory, they would hear tell of a white man who had earned an Apache princess's love not through force or trickery, but through simple respect for what was sacred and a willingness to keep his word no matter the cost.